At 14:37 hours on August 13th, 1944, Flight Lieutenant Geoffrey Brown banked his Typhoon hard over the Normandy countryside and saw what every pilot dreams of and dreads in equal measure. Stretched beneath him along the road between Falaise and Argentan, bumper to bumper for 7 miles, sat the entire German 7th Army. 12,000 vehicles, 300 tanks, 60,000 men, all trying to squeeze through a gap 12 miles wide. All of them trapped. The smell in the cockpit was cordite and sweat, leather and hydraulic fluid. Brown's gloved hand rested on the throttle of the Napier Sabre engine, thundering 6 feet in front of him. 24 cylinders arranged in an H configuration, 2,200 horsepower shaking the airframe at 2,700 RPM. The Typhoon could hit 422 miles per hour in level flight. But that wasn't what made it lethal. Mounted under each wing, 4 RP-3 rockets, 60 pounds of high explosive per warhead, 3 inches in diameter, 5 feet 4 inches long, 11 pounds of cordite propellant, effective range 1,600 meters. So this wasn't going to be a battle. It was going to be mathematics. If this story matters to you, subscribe now. These men didn't fight to be forgotten. What Brown didn't know was that 3 days earlier, the Allied command had made a decision that created this moment. On August 7, 1944, Hitler had personally ordered a counterattack at Mortain, throwing 5 panzer divisions west instead of retreating east. The attack failed within 18 hours. By August 12th, American forces under Patton had swung north to Argentan. Canadian and Polish forces were pushing south toward Falaise. The gap between them, 12 miles. Inside that gap, the 5th Panzer Army and 7th Army. 80,000 to 100,000 troops, the remnants of 11 panzer divisions, everything Germany had left in Normandy. The doctrine was simple. German combined arms warfare relied on speed and concentration of force. Mobility was survival. Take away the vehicles, you take away the army. The British understood this with clinical precision. The Typhoon wasn't designed as an interceptor. It was designed as a solution to a specific problem. How do you stop an armored column? Answer: you don't stop it. You erase it. Brown nosed the Typhoon down. 405 feet per second closing speed. His squadron, 183, was one of 23 Typhoon squadrons operating with RAF 2nd Tactical Air Force that day. The plan was coordination at industrial scale. Number 83 group controlled 12 squadrons. Number 84 group controlled 11 more. Weather, clear. Visibility, unlimited. German fighter cover, non-existent. The Luftwaffe had already withdrawn to defend the Reich. The roads below were undefended airspace, but they weren't undefended ground. At 1,200 feet, Brown could see the muzzle flashes, German flak batteries, 80 meters guns, 37 mm autocannons, 20 mm quad-mounted systems. The Germans knew the Typhoons were coming. They'd been coming since dawn. Every vehicle in the column had orders to keep moving, but the mathematics of a traffic jam don't care about orders. When the lead vehicle stops, everything behind it stops, and when everything stops, it becomes a target. Brown picked his mark. A Panther tank at the head of a column, range 950 meters. He pressed the first rocket release. Whoosh! The RP-3 leapt from the rail, cordite flame 30 feet long. 4 seconds of flight time. The rocket didn't need to be accurate. It needed to be devastating. A direct hit would penetrate 130 meters of armor. A near miss would destroy the tracks, the engine, or kill the crew through concussion alone. The Panther exploded, not a fire, an explosion. The ammunition inside cooked off. 16 rounds of 75mm or high explosive. The turret separated from the hull and landed 40 feet away. Time from rocket release to detonation, 4.2 seconds. Behind the Panther, 12 trucks stopped. They had nowhere to go. Brown fired his second rocket, third, fourth. By the time he pulled up at 600 feet, he'd expended all 8 rockets. He banked hard right to avoid the flat corridor and headed back to base. His combat report, filed at 15:12 hours, claimed 3 tanks destroyed, 4 vehicles destroyed, 6 vehicles damaged. He was one of 87 pilots who flew that afternoon. Between August 13 and August 16th, RAF 2nd Tactical Air Force flew 2,088 sorties over the Falaise Pocket. The pilots claimed 500 motor vehicles destroyed and 40 tanks destroyed. The word claimed is critical here. In the chaos of combat at 300 miles per hour through smoke and explosions, accurate assessment is impossible. Pilots see explosions and report kills. It's not dishonesty. It's the fog of war rendered at 400 feet per second, but there's a number that matters more than claims. After the battle, the British Army's No. 2 Operational Research Section walked the roads. They counted 5,644 destroyed, damaged, or abandoned German vehicles, 358 tanks and self-propelled guns. Let's talk about that discrepancy. Typhoon pilots flying over Mortain on August 7-10 claimed 252 tanks destroyed. The ORS found 9 tanks that showed evidence of air attack damage. 9, not 252. The hit rate with RP-3 rockets against armor was approximately 4%. That's not a failure of the weapon, that's the nature of unguided rockets fired from a moving platform at 350 miles per hour against a target that's 20 feet long. So if the Typhoons weren't killing tanks, what were they killing? Everything else: trucks, half-tracks, command vehicles, supply columns, artillery tractors, fuel tankers, ammunition carriers, communications vans, field kitchens, ambulances, everything that makes an army move. A panzer division without tanks is still an infantry formation. A panzer division without trucks is 45 men walking home. The strategic mathematics are brutal. A Panther tank in 1944 cost 117,100 Reichsmarks. A SDKFZ 7 half-track cost 22,000 Reichsmarks. An Opel Blitz truck cost 3,500 Reichsmarks. Germany could replace a Panther in 6 weeks. They could replace a truck in 9 days, but they couldn't replace 10,000 trucks in 6 weeks. By August 16th, the German 7th Army had lost its logistical spine. Not because the Typhoons killed every tank, because they killed enough of everything else that the tanks didn't matter. And the Typhoon pilots kept coming. August 18th, 1944, the greatest single day of destruction. By dawn, the Falaise Gap had narrowed to 4 miles, the corridor between Train and Chambois. Every German unit still west of that line was trying to get through it. The roads were packed. Vehicles 3 abreast, horses, carts, men on foot. It looked like Napoleon's retreat from Moscow compressed into 4 square miles. No. 2 Tactical Air Force put everything in the air: Typhoons, Spitfires, Mosquitoes, Mustangs. The Typhoon squadrons alone flew 294 sorties. Between dawn and dusk on August 18th, RAF pilots claimed 159 vehicles destroyed and 700 damaged. They claimed 124 tanks destroyed and 100 damaged. The actual count doesn't matter anymore. By sundown on August 18th, the roads were impassable, not because they were destroyed, because they were full of burning trucks, full of dead horses, full of men who'd abandoned their vehicles and were walking east through the fields. Typhoons had achieved something no amount of bombing could accomplish. They'd turned an army into a mob. You're watching history no one teaches. This channel exists because you subscribe. If this is the kind of history you want, clinical, precise, no propaganda, hit subscribe now. But here's what the pilots didn't see from 1,200 feet. On the ground, in the column, a 20-year-old Panzer Grenadier named Klaus Huber was trying to stay alive. He'd been retreating for 6 days. No sleep, no hot food. His unit, what was left of the 2nd SS Panzer Division, had been ordered to hold a position near Saint-Lambert-sur-Dives. The position didn't exist anymore. The village didn't exist anymore. Everything west of the Dives River was fire. Huber's diary, recovered after the war, describes August 18th. The jarbos come in waves. You hear them before you see them. The engines scream, then the rockets, then the explosions, then nothing. You don't see the aircraft that kills you. You see the one that missed. The psychological warfare was unintentional but absolute. German soldiers called the Typhoon Jabojäger, fighter-hunter. They called the RP-3 rockets Panzerschreck, tank terror. The sound of a Typhoon's Napier Sabre engine became a Pavlovian trigger. When you heard that scream, you ran. Didn't matter if you were in a tank or on foot, you ran. But running didn't help. The Typhoons were flying 16 sorties per aircraft per day, each sortie 28 minutes from takeoff to rocket release. 10 minutes in the target area. 22 minutes back to base. 45 minutes to refuel, rearm, and brief the next mission. The ground crews at RAF stations in Normandy were turning aircraft around in under an hour. It was industrial-scale air warfare. The Luftwaffe couldn't match it. They didn't have the fuel. They didn't have the pilots. They didn't have the aircraft. The British did. By August 1944, RAF's 2nd Tactical Air Force had 200 aircraft operational in Normandy. 340 of them were Typhoons. Each Typhoon carried 8 rockets. That's 2,020 rockets in a single mass strike. At 60 pounds of explosive per rocket, that's 163,200 pounds of explosive. 81 tons, delivered in under 30 minutes. That's not air support, that's artillery from the sky. But there's a cost nobody talks about. Between August 7 and August 21, RAF's 2nd Tactical Air Force lost 131 aircraft. 41 of them were Typhoons. Most were shot down by flak, not fighters. The Germans couldn't contest the air, but they could put up a wall of steel. An 80mm flak gun could fire 15 rounds per minute. A quad-mounted 20-minute system could fire 800 rounds per minute. The Typhoon attacks weren't surgical strikes, they were running a gauntlet. Flight Lieutenant Jeffrey Brown, the pilot who started this story, didn't make it home. On August 19th, his Typhoon, serial JP681, was hit by ground fire during an attack run south of Troon. He was 24 years old. His name is on panel 268 of the Runnymede Memorial. 11 other pilots from 183 Squadron died in August 1944. That's one squadron, 1 month. If you believe these men deserve to be remembered, not as propaganda but as they were, subscribe. These stories don't tell themselves. Now let's talk about what happened next. By August 21st, 1944, the Falaise Pocket was closed. Polish forces linked up with American units at Chambois. The gap was sealed. Of the 80,000 to 100,000 German troops caught inside, 10,000 to 15,000 were killed, 40,000 to 50,000 were captured, 20,000 to 50,000 escaped. That escape number bothers people. Historians call it the failure to close the gap. Patton called it the biggest mistake of the war, but the numbers tell a different story. The Germans who escaped weren't an army anymore, they were survivors. The 7th Army had lost 100% of its heavy equipment. The 5th Panzer Army had 11 panzer divisions in Normandy on August 1st. By September worst, those divisions could field a combined total of 18 operational tanks. 18. The strategic mathematics, Germany, needed 6 weeks to reconstitute a panzer division. They needed 12 weeks to rebuild a field army. They didn't have 12 weeks. On August 15, Allied forces landed in southern France. On August 25th, Paris was liberated. On September 3rd, British forces crossed into Belgium. The German army in the west never recovered from Falaise. Not because the Allies killed every soldier, because they killed The logistics and the Typhoons did most of that killing. Let's talk about doctrine for a moment. In 1944, air-to-ground attack was still experimental doctrine. The Americans preferred high-altitude strategic bombing, flatten the factories, destroy the infrastructure, win the war through industrial collapse. The British developed something different: tactical air power. Don't bomb the factory. Bomb the trucks leaving the factory. Don't destroy the tank. Destroy the fuel tanker supplying the tank. The Typhoon was the physical manifestation of that doctrine. It wasn't the best fighter. The Spitfire was faster at altitude. It wasn't the best bomber. The Mosquito carried more payload, but the Typhoon could carry 8 rockets, fly low enough to see targets, and survive the flak long enough to deliver those rockets. That combination didn't exist anywhere else. The Germans understood this too late. By the time they realized tactical air power was the real threat, they'd already committed to defending against strategic bombers. They built thousands of 88 Mirtador flak guns. They developed jet interceptors. They prioritized high-altitude defense, all of it useless against a Typhoon at 800 feet. The cost-benefit analysis is stark. One Typhoon cost approximately $10,000 to build. 8 RP-3 rockets cost approximately $160. Total investment per aircraft per sortie, $10,160. German losses per sortie averaged across all Typhoon missions in August approximately 2.4 vehicles destroyed or damaged. Value of one Opel Blitz truck, $400. Value of one Panther tank, $14,000. Even assuming every kill was a truck, the exchange rate was profitable. And not every kill was a truck. But the real value wasn't in vehicles destroyed, it was in missions prevented. A supply convoy that never reaches the front means tanks without ammunition. An ammunition convoy destroyed means artillery batteries that can't fire. A fuel tanker burned means panzers abandoned on the roadside. The Typhoon attacks created a cascading logistical collapse. The Germans couldn't reinforce, couldn't resupply, couldn't retreat effectively. By August 18th, German commanders were ordering their men to abandon vehicles and escape on foot. That's not a military defeat, that's a rout. And it was created by 340 Typhoons, flying an average of 14 sorties per day for 72 hours. Here's what the Germans said about it. General Hans Eberbach, commander of the 5th Panzer Army, was captured on August 31st. During interrogation, he was asked what had broken the German defense in Normandy. His answer: the Jabos, always the Jabos. We could not move in daylight. We could not concentrate forces. We could not execute any operational plan. The Jabos made command impossible. Field Marshal Günther von Kluge, commander of Army Group B, wrote a letter to Hitler on August 15th, just before he was relieved of command. It was found on his body after he committed suicide on August 19th. The letter said, "The enemy air force has complete control. Our movements are impossible during daylight. Our losses are catastrophic. No army can withstand this." That's the voice of a man who understood he was fighting a weapon he couldn't counter. And from the British perspective, they understood it too. Air Chief Marshal Sir Trafford Leigh-Mallory, commander of Allied air forces, wrote in his after-action report, "The destruction in the Falaise area was the greatest concentration of air attack on ground forces in the history of warfare. The psychological effect was as important as the material effect. The German army ceased to function as an organized force. If this stayed with you, press like. In one word, tell us what this was. Subscribe. Because when history stops being examined, it turns into myth. So what's the final accounting? Between August 13 and August 21, 1944, RAF 2nd Tactical Air Force and the US 9th Air Force flew approximately 12,000 sorties over the Falaise Pocket. They claimed 3,000 vehicles destroyed and 391 tanks destroyed. The Operational Research Section counted 5,644 vehicles and 358 tanks actually destroyed or abandoned. That's a claim-to-kill ratio of approximately 1.88 to 1. That ratio matters because it tells you something about combat reporting. Pilots overclaim, always have, always will. It's not dishonesty, it's the combination of speed, stress, smoke, and adrenaline. What looks like a kill from 1,000 feet might be a near miss. What looks like a tank might be a half-track. What matters is the trend line. The pilots claimed thousands. The count confirmed thousands. The order of magnitude was correct, and the strategic result was absolute. The German army lost the war in the west at Falaise, not because they lost every soldier, not because they lost every tank, because they lost the ability to wage mobile warfare. From August 21, 1944 until the surrender on May 8, 1945, the German army in the west fought a defensive retreat. No major counter-offensives, no operational flexibility, no ability to concentrate force and break through. They lost that capability in 72 hours on the roads between Falaise and Argentan. The Typhoons didn't win the war, but they shortened it. How much? That's the question historians argue about. Some say 6 months, some say 3. The most conservative estimate, 6 weeks. 6 weeks fewer of V-2 rocket attacks on London. 6 weeks fewer of concentration camp operations. 6 weeks fewer of casualties on all sides. That's the mathematics that matters. The Typhoon went out of service in 1945. Total production, 3,317 aircraft. Total combat losses, 670 aircraft. Loss rate, 20%. That's high. But effectiveness isn't measured in survival rate, it's measured in mission accomplishment. The mission was destroy the German army's ability to maneuver. Mission accomplished. Today, one Typhoon survives. RB396, it's being restored to flight in England. When it flies again, it'll be the only flying example of the aircraft that broke the German army in 72 hours. Not because it was the fastest, not because it was the most advanced, because it was the right tool at the right moment applied with industrial precision. That's the lesson. Wars aren't won by wonder weapons. They're won by logistics, by replacement rates, by sortie generation, by the unglamorous mathematics of tons delivered and hours flown and targets serviced. The Typhoon was never supposed to be a glamorous aircraft. It was supposed to be a problem solver. And at Falaise, in August 1944, it solved the problem. Thank you for watching Britain in Battle.